Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, this is Dr. Karen Reivich. I'm a psychologist and mother of four and co-founder of Fishful Thinking with Pepperidge Farm Goldfish. And tonight we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is building self-efficacy in our children through the way we praise them. And so let me just start off by giving you kind of the bottom line, and there's going to be a couple terms in there which I'll define for you in just a second. But here's the bottom line. Self-efficacy, which is different than self-esteem, and I'll talk about that in a minute, is critical for resilience, and it's critical for our kids' overall well-being. And what the research shows is very interesting. It tells us that the way we praise our kids, what comes out of our mouth when we're giving them praise, can either build self-efficacy or undercut self-efficacy. And the key to praise, if we want to build our kids' belief in themselves and their confidence in themselves and their sense of competence, that's what self-efficacy is about, then we want to make sure we're using what's called process praise, which is where we praise the strategy our kids use to bring about a good outcome. So that's the bottom line. Process praise builds self-efficacy. And now let me kind of slow down a little bit and define some of this for you. And then we're going to turn to three of our Fishful Thinking faculty members who are with us tonight on the podcast. And we're going to talk to them about their children and how they build self-efficacy in their kids and how they praise their children. Joining me on this Blog Talk Radio segment are members of the Fishful Thinking faculty, a select group of passionate mommy bloggers that are well-versed in the Fishful Thinking program. Faculty members work closely with the Pepperidge Farm Goldfish brand to develop programs that serve as resources for moms and are compensated for their involvement. So let me begin by talking a little bit about the difference between self-efficacy, which might be kind of a newer term to some folks, versus self-esteem. So self-esteem is language we've all heard a lot. It's helping our kids to feel good about themselves. And certainly there's nothing wrong with self-esteem. Obviously, we want our kids to feel good about themselves. The problem, however, is that sometimes the way that parents or schools try to teach self-esteem, helping the kids to feel good about themselves, really doesn't do much of anything, or maybe at worst actually is counterproductive. It actually undercuts kids' belief in themselves. Self-efficacy, on the other hand, is helping your child to know her strengths and her weaknesses. So it's being honest about what she's great at, who she is at her best, what her character strengths are, as well as her weaknesses, and helping our children to know what I call their go-to strengths. What are the strengths that they can rely on to overcome obstacles, meet challenges, reach goals? And that's what we want to focus on tonight, building that sense of self-efficacy. Here's the problem with self-esteem, and I've seen this in schools. And I'm not trying to disparage educators. I have great admiration for schools and educators. But sometimes in the name of self-esteem, I think some kind of goofy stuff goes on. So as an example, I was at a school, and when I showed up, the teacher flashed the lights and said, "Great, you're here just in time for our self-esteem moment." And that kind of gave me pause right there. She flashed the lights and she said to the kids, "Okay, line up." All the kids lined up, getting ready to go to library, and they said in unison, "I am a snowflake, special and unique. There is no one else like me." End of the self-esteem moment. And the problem with that is that really doesn't teach our kids anything about their skills, their talents, their strengths. It's an aphorism that I believe does probably nothing. And if we feed our kids a heavy diet of those kind of things, special and unique, that we're really not equipping them with the knowledge about themselves that they'll need to cope with whatever life puts in their path. And that's where self-efficacy comes in. And again, self-efficacy is helping our kids to know who they are at their best, what their strengths are, what their skills are, as well as their weaknesses. So it's balanced and honest. Now, one of the ways that we can build self-efficacy in our kids is through how we praise them. And this is where it gets kind of fascinating. There are two different types of praise that I'm going to describe. One is called person praise, and the second is called process praise. So I'm going to give you examples of each. And as I give them to you, kind of listen and try to sort of figure out which type of praise is your typical style of praising your children. So person praise is pretty much like it sounds. It's when we praise the person. So imagine that your child got a good grade on a test, and they come home and they're proud and they show you the test. Person praise would be saying something like, "Oh, you're so smart." Or your child brings home an art project and you say, "Wow, you're so creative, you're wonderful." Or they clean their room and you say, "What a good boy, what a good girl." All of those are examples of person praise, where we're really praising our child in their entirety. We're talking about sort of who they are as a being. Now, on the surface, that probably doesn't sound like there's anything wrong with that. What could be bad about telling our kids they're smart, they're beautiful, they're good? But research actually shows that kids who are fed kind of a heavy diet of person praise do fine when everything's going well in their life, when they're getting good grades, when their art projects are great, when their sports teams win. But when they encounter failure or setback, kids who have got this strong diet of person praise actually tend to stumble. They become more helpless. They feel worse about themselves, and they tend to shy away from challenges and risks compared to kids who, instead of getting a lot of that person praise, gets what's called process praise. So let me tell you what process praise is. Process praise, rather than focusing on our kid and who they are, you're good, you're smart, all of that, it's where we focus on the strategy or the process that they use to bring about a good outcome. So think about the child that brings home a good grade on the test. Rather than saying, "Oh, you're so smart," person praise, we can say process praise. "Wow, all those descriptors you use really help to illustrate your point." Or, "I'm not surprised you got a great grade because I saw how hard you were studying and you made sure to turn off your iPod so that you could really focus." So process praise doesn't focus on the kid. It focuses on what the child did to bring about the good outcome. And the research, and this is work done by a psychologist named Carol Dweck, is really compelling. So what I was saying before about kids who get a lot of person praise versus process praise is really important to underscore. That when kids get a lot of person praise, initially it boosts their self-esteem. They feel good about themselves. But in the long term, it actually discourages effort, and it discourages kids from taking on challenges and risks. And the thinking behind this is that when a child gets a lot of person praise, what they're hearing in that praise is, "Mommy or Daddy or teacher thinks I'm smart when I get good grades. They think I'm creative when my drawings are pretty. They think I'm good when I tidy up my room." But the child also then infers, therefore, if my grades aren't good, or my drawings aren't pretty, or my room is a mess, I must not be smart, creative, good anymore. And so none of that, of course, is being said when we use person praise, but that's the kind of message that kids are hearing behind the words. And so as parents, it's really important if we want to build self-efficacy. Remember, self-efficacy is about helping our kids know what strengths they use, what skills they use, what strategies they use to bring about a success. Process praise does that. So one of the things as parents I think we really need to work on is how we can kind of change the diet a bit to make sure that we're spending as much time, maybe even more time, focusing on the process when we praise our kids than on the person. And here's a couple of reasons why I think that's so important. One, it encourages self-efficacy and a sense of mastery. Two, it communicates I'm really paying attention. So when we say to our kids over and over again, oh, you're smart, or good job, or well done, or, you're wonderful, eventually that sort of becomes kind of a drop in the bucket, that our kids might not think that it's sincere just because it's so global in nature and it's the kind of phrase they hear so often. So when you actually take the time to name the process, I really love that opening paragraph that you wrote. You use so many adjectives, it just caught my attention. That obviously took more thought on our part when we're praising them, and it tells our kids we're really paying attention. It also helps our kids to get on winning streaks. So I think that's really important, that if we take the time to name what our child did that brought about the good outcome, or better yet, ask our child, hey, why do you think you got such a strong grade on your paper? We're encouraging our kids to focus on how they did it. And that means that they have a better chance of doing that again in the future. So it enables winning streaks. So in a second we'll hear from some of our faculty members, but let me just kind of summarize, because that's a lot of information I just went through. So here's the summary. Self-esteem is focusing on helping our children to feel good about themselves, and sometimes we do it in kind of sloppy ways. I'm a snowflake, special and unique, and that really doesn't convey much to our children. Self-efficacy, on the other hand, is helping our kids to know their strengths and weaknesses and how to rely on their strengths and skills and talents to bring about good outcomes. And we know that there are two different types of praise that we can give our kids, styles of praise. Person praise, which really focuses on our kids' sort of character and who they are as a person. You're good, you're smart. Versus process praise, where we name what the child did to bring about the good outcome. And research shows that it's process praise that builds self-efficacy. So that's what we're going to focus on now as we talk to some of our faculty members for Fishful Thinking. And let me start, Sarah, with you. Here's a question I would love to hear your thoughts on. Could you think about a situation with one of your kids where you might have used person praise instead of process praise? And we all do that. I know myself, I still catch myself with a lot of person praise, so that's a normal thing for lots of us. So tell us about a time where you used person praise maybe instead of process praise, and then let's see if we can practice. How could you adapt your response to change it from person praise into process praise?
Okay. I think you're absolutely right. I think it's so easy to use the generic response, good boy or good job. And I think because I have 3 sons who are very involved in sports, you see this a lot. Sort of the typical response from the bleachers is, good job. And now that I've been working with the Fishful Thinking program, I tend to notice that a little bit more. So I try not to yell that from where I'm sitting. I think what works better is, yelling something like, nice pass, or way to cover your man, or way to stick with it. those sorts of things instead. To use the process praise.
Yeah, that's such a great. I mean, I hadn't thought so much about sports, but you're right. I mean, if you listen to what's being shouted from the bleachers, it really is.
It's a lot of good job.
Yeah, and you're shouting out, way to cover your man, really tells your son exactly what he did that was good. What brought about the good outcome, and so that's a great example. All right, let me turn now. Cecily, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, thanks.
So here's a question for you. So one of the things that self-efficacy, that builds our kids' self-efficacy is really helping them to know what their strengths are. So I'm wondering, if you could share with us what are some of the strengths that you see in your kids or one of your children, and then how do you help your child to really kind of own those strengths? Because it's easy sometimes, for our kids to kind of, not take that part of themselves so seriously, not really own, who they are at their best. So can you share some thoughts on that?
My daughter Gracie is our family artist, and one of her great strengths is this amazing ability to see creativity and beauty and joy in everyday things. I don't think she's ever found a box that she didn't like or couldn't make into something fantastic. And as her mom, I try my very best to provide her with the kind of environment that allows that creativity and joy of life to flourish. I've always praised her for her artistic abilities. It's been a no-brainer. She's been like that since she could speak. But only recently have I really started listening to what I say and how I say it so that I can focus more on that process praise that Dr. Reivich has been talking about. Rather than just throwing out "you're such a great artist" comment, I really work hard to pay attention to the details in her work and to talk to her about it. And since I've been doing that, I honestly have seen her working harder on details and pushing herself in a way that she never has before, so that she can get that sort of focused, mom's really paying attention kind of praise again. And it's been amazing for me to watch, because rather than just kind of resting on her laurels and doing the same things that she always does, she is pushing herself to do more. And the change in both of us as a result of this has been really remarkable.
It's such a great example, because you're right. I mean, this has been, a strength, a talent of hers, and I love the fact that you've noticed that just by, highlighting more of the details, what exactly she's doing that you find powerful in her work, or, that really sort of captures something, that actually has led her to, sounds like, embrace this passion even more fully. And that's a great self-efficacy story right there. So thank you. Now, so Cheryl, we got a question for you. One of the things that I think we as parents, need to do, often do, is help our kids to understand their strengths and weaknesses, so that they have this very balanced view of themselves. So I'm wondering if you could describe a time when you helped your child to really understand his or her strengths and weaknesses, and then, what came of it? Was there an action that your child took based on that sort of thought process, that thinking that he or she did with you? How did that play out?
That's funny, Karen. I mean, I guess if my son had a really hard time tying his shoes, getting Velcro wouldn't be the right thought process to get out of it. But that was what happened at once. But that's not really the right way to go about it, I suppose. As a mom of twins, and I know you are too, I think so many people feel it's though their responsibility to say that they're snowflakes, special and unique, and both of my children get a lot of that person praise because they're trying to build their esteem and uniqueness. And so I feel like I've really, through Fishful Thinking and a lot of the activities, have had the opportunity to really think about the processes that make them who they are and what the actions that they take that make them unique. they can both be the smart one, despite what people go, oh, which one's the smart one or which one's the good one, and you do feel like you have to kind of counterbalance that. One instance in particular, my she-twin had all people all the time, oh, you're so bright, you're so smart, and you're right. It's as a parent, it's very uplifting for us to hear that, and I'm sure it's very esteem building for them. But you're right, it doesn't build a lot of efficacy or make them feel comfortable when those challenges come along that don't just come reflexively. One case in particular this year, our daughter Sarah started getting math that all of a sudden was a challenge. My gosh, there's 2 digits, and you have a column, and you have to carry one thing over. And I think all of a sudden, because she had gotten a lot of person praise, some mistakenly by me and a lot by others, it became a real challenge for her until we started talking a little bit more about how can she, it's not that she's weak at math, but how can she develop a process that maybe, if she is a little challenged by it, how could she become more self-effective, and how would she not have that affect how she felt about her esteem as being a bright girl? So we spent a lot of time. I said, what I really like about you, Sarah, is that she doesn't go to her go-to strength of being smart. Her biggest quality is that she just doesn't give up. She's very persistent. She, she hones in and she focuses, and if she stops and methodically thinks about those processes, she could work her way through it. Might take a little bit more time. She might have to do a little frustration dance if she's angry, get up from the table and come to that emotional awareness when you may not feel that you're as strong as something as you might like. But she really did, and she's, now she really is up for taking those academic challenges where at first they really became something where she got downtrodden earlier this year. Now she's, wanting to join up with a mind games team in her school, and it's been a remarkable difference to see how really focusing on her process and reinforcing that process has counterbalanced what she already knew about herself, that she is a bright girl, but that, she's the one that controls how she succeeds in academics.
I think bringing in that idea of, just like how you said it, that she's the one that controls how she succeeds. I mean, you don't get that in self-esteem. You get that through the self-efficacy, what we're talking about tonight. And so I think that's just a really nice sort of summary for us, that part of what we're trying to do with process praise is help our kids name or know how they bring about success and overcome challenges so that they can be in control of that. That's a great way for us to think about it. So thanks to our Fishful Thinking faculty members. It's always great to talk with you. And let me just remind people that there's lots of great articles and everyday activities and information at fishfulthinking.com around building self-efficacy. So I encourage people to go there and check out all the resources. And you can also go to facebook.com/fishfulthinking to connect with us and learn more about promoting self-efficacy in your children so that they can thrive no matter what life puts in their path. Have a good night.